Hi, welcome back, guys. This is your friend the Fanfics back with amazing fanfiction. This is this series of What If Deku Had a Fire Quirk and Trained by Endeavour. Izuku Midoriya's life changed drastically the moment he turned 5. Once ignored by his parents and classmates, he suddenly was put in a pedestal by his peers, only to be treated completely different since the day Katsuki Bakugo had decided he had enough of having him as a friend. His fire quirk was impressive on his own. He heard one of his teachers say, as many had congratulated him when he had managed to ignite his palms in fire and show them around on the room. However, there was also jealousy. "You think you are so much better than us, isn't that right?" Katsuki Bakugo, by then 8, asked. Izuku had been quick to negate him, nervous hands shaking. Small children wouldn't remember that small and insignificant moment. But Bakugo made sure they did. It all started to go downhill the day he took Izuku and the friends they had made together to the park. He had asked Izuku after ignoring him for weeks, and he had accepted, hope in his green eyes indicating that he really thought that was a friendly invitation, he thought. Izuku walked. Without noticing, he was ahead of everyone else until a stone collided with his back, violently, and he yelled in pain. "You're going all ahead of us. You really think you are the leader or something?" Katsuki screamed, outraged. Along him, Inasa and the rest of the boys standed. Some looked guilty, but most of them seemed to share the irritation Katsuki expressed, meaning they didn't really care that he had thrown a stone to their friend. They all thought Katsuki was saying the truth, Izuku realized as he gulped. He felt tears in his eyes, but refused to cry. After all, he didn't have any ego complex. It was all a misunderstanding. "Kakin, what are you saying? We don't have any leaders. That is absurd." He defended himself, his voice wavering. He really didn't know what to say. Katsuki's outburst was out of blue. "Stop pretending you don't know what I am talking about. Ever since you have gotten your flashy new quirk, you think you are so much better than us. You are so quiet, as if we don't deserve to be spoken to," Katsuki insisted. And once again, some kids nodded, clearly sharing the sentiment. "We will show you that you are nothing. Not even your flashy brand new quirk can make you superior." And with that, they all rushed to attack him. They didn't know Izuku was mostly quiet because he lived with a monster, one that was waiting for him every time he went home. Shadow ran as fast as his legs would allow him. He was certain he had made his escape at the most opportune moment. He had made sure to plan his escape when none of the caretakers responsible for watching over him were free to keep an eye on his father's most precious creation. He had carefully planned the necessary directions to reach the police station. And although it was a long journey on foot, he knew he had the energy and desperation needed to get there, using the map that his mother had bought him of the city after he had made it clear how interested he was in knowing the city's infrastructure, which had earned him a disbelieving look from his mom and a pleased reaction from Endeavour, who had once again claimed that his son was born to achieve greatness. After being at a prudent distance from home, Shadow finally arrived at his destination after a long walk. He managed to capture the receptionist's attention as soon as he entered. "Are you lost, kid?" she asked, kindness in her tone. Shadow's heart raced. It was a good sign. A kind person would be more willing to listen to him. "No, I'm exactly where I want to be." Shadow was not surprised at all when he saw the surprise on the officer's face. Perhaps he was not accustomed to children sounding sure of themselves. "I need to take up your time." Todoroki was referred to a police officer in a closed room. Ignoring the urgency to ask for the open door to be closed, Shadow recounted the story of his life and the years of torment carried out by his own father. "Look, kid, I think you might be mistaken. What you just told me is what any other kid your age would be grateful to experience. He's training you to become strong. Don't give up, champion. Sometimes in life, you have to face several obstacles to follow your dreams. I think you'll be a magnificent hero." Surely Endeavour had his reasons for applying those measures. The officer kept talking, but Todoroki, 8 years old, was no longer listening. Todoroki realized that all was lost. The next thing that happened was that Endeavour was notified that his missing son was safe and sound at the police station. Todoroki remembered the kind face of the receptionist, and he wondered, already in his room, and without any more tears available, if she would have had believed him. Katsuki Bakugo had convinced everyone that Izuku Midoriya was a conceited human being, an arrogant and egotistical guy due to his powerful fire quirk. He never showed his fire again, hoping that everyone would forget about it over time. They did not, but once they started to grow up, the bullying was replaced with a pervasive indifference. Izuku didn't know which one was better. Everyone ignored him, and he never tried to present himself to anyone, since the mere thought of starting a conversation was paralyzing. He did not ever raise his hand, nor even say hi to people. He felt his face redden, and he wondered if his shy character was once again taken as a display of a superiority complex. Izuku quickly remembered the hushed whispers every time he was forced to talk by teachers. It was a double-edged sword, this newfound invisibility. On one hand, the physical torment had ceased, and he no longer had to endure Katsuki's cruel taunts. But on the other, he had become a ghost in his own life, a mere observer in a world where he yearned for acceptance. Perhaps he would never be able to make friends until high school would finish. He felt his eyes burn at the thought, and he walked faster to his home despite knowing what was waiting for him. Dad would be already at the house. Opening the door with his own key, he was met with the familiar mix of tobacco and cheap alcohol, which confirmed that, indeed, Hisashi was home. He was a man who had once aspired to greatness, but his dreams had crumbled into dust. His face, etched with the lines of disappointment, rarely bore a smile, and when it did, it held no warmth. He had become a stern and unforgiving figure, his eyes clouded with bitterness. His words were like shards of glass, capable of cutting deep with their sharpness, and his voice carried the weight of unfulfilled ambitions. He had dreamt of being a hero, but he was met with failure, since he didn't pass any of the writing exams that were required to enter a hero academia like UA. He had a once gentle demeanor that Izuku could still remember from his own old shattered memories of the man holding him in his arms like he was the best gift a human being could ask for. It was gone after his quirk manifested, this power and curse that had forever changed his life. Izuku, you are late. He snapped from the couch, holding an unfinished beer. We need to keep training that quirk of yours if you want to go to UA. He slurred, clearly affected by the alcohol. It seemed that he had consumed too much to be a threat of any kind, and Izuku felt relief. The dream to go to UA was largely his father, who wanted to live his own dreams through his son. It was as if his father saw in him a second chance at life. Izuku found it pathetic. He did want to be a hero, fiercely. Not only would he save people, maybe from the same bullying and indifference he was met with, but it would also provide him an income, which would mean that he would be able to move out, far away from failed dreams and the alcohol smell that he had grown to hate. I'm sorry, Father. The teacher wanted to speak to me about me going to UA. It was true. He wasn't expecting the pep talk he got from the teacher, who had found out about this dream and excitedly motivated him to pursue it, saying that a fire quirk like his would be very powerful in the business. Izuku wasn't thrilled, but he felt his heart soften at the unexpected support from his teacher. He was very encouraging, said he thought I had more chances than anyone else in the class. Izuku continued, hoping this would cheer up his father and stop taking his alcohol-induced anger on him. Well, isn't that something? Of course the teacher would be encouraging. After all, you inherited a better version of my quirk. A very powerful one. But you are too much of a weakling, Izuku. He stared at Izuku's green eyes, who was standing in the middle of the room awkwardly. Heroes don't cry. They aren't softies, he said, staring at the reddened eyes of his son. I'll toughen up, Dad, I promise, Izuku murmured. Showing emotions was a sign of weakness. He knew that it was a lie, and so was his promise. After all, logic told him emotions were what made him human. This time, Hisashi observed him, a smile starting to draw itself on his face, his eyes softening. It was a hesitant, almost reluctant smile, as if it had been buried beneath layers of disappointment and had now found a reason to surface. It seemed like he, for once, observed Izuku with a sense of pride, one that his son knew that he had on him. After all, even if he treated him harshly from the moment he developed a fire quirk, there were moments in training where he seemed to watch him in awe. Izuku had heard him in phone calls, saying how proud he was that his son was surpassing him already at his age, and that he was his most beloved creation. When he heard that, he wanted to cry from happiness. Maybe his father did love him, after all. But then Izuku was met with reality. "All right, get ready now," he yelled, the smile disappearing completely. "You are already too late, and we don't want people wandering about while we are at the fields. Hurry up," he ordered him around, a severe expression on his face. And then Izuku's new torment began. But there was a difference. He was determined to become a hero, not just for his own sake, but to protect those who needed saving, and to prove that even those who showed their emotions were capable of being the strongest heroes of all. Chronic loneliness not only shortens lives, it also compromises the quality of those lives. Large-scale studies have shown that the stress that comes from chronic loneliness is among the most unhealthy things we can experience as humans. It might make you age quicker, it makes cancer deadlier, Alzheimer's advance faster, and your immune system weaker. Chronic loneliness can be twice as deadly as obesity, as well as, Shadow closed the site. It had been a mistake to Google his symptoms in Google, to write down the hollow ache he felt on his chest. Ever since Mom had been gone, things had been incredibly hard. Being an only child felt oppressing sometimes, but wishing for a brother or sister would have been selfish. No one should deserve to go through life having NG as a father. He would have protected them, he thought, but left it as that. To think about it further would mean to let himself dream of the impossible. It wasn't worth it to go into such a bitter and sorrow place. He still remembered his first attempt of escaping home. How wild of an 8-year-old he had been, to come up with a map, a place and time, and execute the same plan, even with all the fear he had felt back then. How hopeful and naive he had been, how much he had dared to dream in only one attempt. There had been only one more attempt to escape, since after everything that had happened and the police involvement, the house security had augmented to the point where Shadow could only be alone and not observed if he went to the bathroom. Writing Mom a letter, hoping for it to be delivered, had been even more foolish. It was weird to think about Izuku's situation. It wasn't impossible that some people would show kindness, and perhaps even a desire to talk to him. Izuku blushed. It was quite a sad thing to think about. But they did, this day. It happened in sports class. Izuku ran all he could, but at some point it seemed like his legs wanted to give out, as he felt dizzy, and he kneeled on the floor. A pale and purple-haired boy approached him. "Are you okay? You know, these exercises are killing me too." Izuku leaned up, and was met with a worried face. "You look like you are about to pass out." However, he saw Katsuki and his gang approach him, and it seemed like he made him change his mind. "They are coming. Be careful," he warned before taking off and continuing to run on the pitch. Izuku felt tears gathering in his eyes, and he for once desired to not be so emotional. He wasn't going to give them any reaction, especially not because someone was nice to him. After all, to get a reaction from him is what Katsuki had always wanted, somehow desperate from time to time when he saw his taunts didn't have any effect on him. "I might be quirkless, but at least I am fit. Be careful, nerd. You might be having a heart attack," he yelled as he ran, and his friends laughed. "He left you, just like everyone else does." Izuku quickly stood up, trying to shake off the shame he felt. Izuku was on his way home, his heart still clenched in his chest from the encounter earlier. Katsuki's cruel taunts couldn't be having an effect on him, he decided, and he chose to go home later. He knew his dad would be busy at this time, since he was a policeman who sometimes actually did his duty. He wandered on the streets, wondering what could happen if his force companions knew about the way he had kicked him yesterday. Bruises on his legs from all the beating. Hisashi was mad. He kept his fire intense, turned blue from the effort. He somehow wasn't happy that himself wasn't able to withstand the extreme heat, and had asked Izuku on reiterated occasions to keep himself from exposing him to such fierce temperatures. He had turned a deaf ear, and it had felt so gratifying. Izuku still relished the joy he felt from not listening to his abusive old man. It was then, when Izuku walked on an empty road area, and he heard a gurgling sound come behind him, and he was soon surrounded and suffocated by sludge. The villain's sludge-like form engulfed Izuku's body, making it difficult for him to breathe. Panic surged within him as he struggled to break free. His mind raced, and in that desperate moment, he decided to use his fire quirk. He had always been hesitant to unleash it, but this was a matter of life and death. With every ounce of his willpower, Izuku summoned his fire quirk. Flames erupted from his body, creating a brilliant, intense blaze that scorched the sludge villain. It writhed in pain and began to retreat, its form boiling and hissing in the face of the searing heat. Izuku's fire wasn't just flashy. It was a powerful weapon. As the villain screamed and recoiled, it became clear that Izuku was on the verge of defeating it with his fire alone. But just as he was about to secure his victory, a towering figure appeared behind him. Flames of white-hot intensity raged around the newcomer. Endeavour had arrived on the scene, his eyes fixed on Izuku. He was impressed by the young boy's determination and the raw power of his fire quirk. Watching Izuku fend off the villain showcased his potential. Endeavour saw an opportunity to set an example for his own son, Shadow, who had struggled with his own fire quirk. With a single, decisive burst of his fiery abilities, Endeavour swiftly immobilized the sludge villain and reduced it to smoldering debris. He turned to Izuku, his eyes aflame with a newfound respect. "Your quirk is impressive," Endeavour rumbled, his deep voice resonating with authority. "You've got potential, kid. Would you be interested in some training? I could show you how to harness that power." Izuku, still panting and covered in soot, looked up at the imposing hero in awe. He couldn't believe what had just transpired. His life had taken an unexpected turn, and the offer from Endeavour seemed like a ray of hope in the midst of his struggles. He knew the fire hero was known for his firm authority and extremely serious character, so this felt like an offer that had to have an ulterior motive to provide such an offer. However, this would likely impress his father and make him back up. As Endeavour extended his hand, Izuku grasped it firmly, determined to rise above his challenges and become the hero he had always dreamed of becoming. Little did he know that this encounter with the Flame Hero would mark the beginning of a new chapter in his life. Izuku had no idea what he had gotten himself into. "Shadow, I have news to tell you." Endeavour stood in his door, after opening it abruptly without knocking. Shadow was watching his usual science videos about human social nature with his AirPods on, and he wondered if he should take them off. He did not. "I have been training a boy. He has a really powerful quirk, and I thought he would set an example for you. His potential is none other than extraordinary." Shadow's heart sank. So this was what had been keeping him so busy. It was not the high crime rate, nor the fact that he decided to give him some peace due to him being way too prepared already. It didn't make any difference, after all. He probably would never meet the boy if he wasn't training here. He asked himself why he cared. He was just training some poor guy to surpass him, which they would never be able to. Shadow would already be in the recommended exams, and the chance of getting it was very high, if not already decided due to his father's social status. "Cool," he said, as he replayed the video on his old phone. Endeavour was pressured by his own co-workers to buy him a phone, After he took him to his workplace once, and they saw all Shadow did was stare into the air without anything to do. It put his father into shame, and he ended up buying him one despite hating it, and considering the device a great distraction. Endeavour was furious facing this indifference, nonetheless, but he decided to just leave, not without banging the door first. The rules were simple, he had said. Isolation from any external distractions to make him focus solely on the training. He is discouraged from engaging in unnecessary social interactions or leisure activities that distract from training. Tardiness is not excusable. Absolute obedience. Izuku would not dare to question any of Endeavor's decisions. Complaints are for the weak. If he did not like the training, he should give up on his dreams altogether. Training time must be utilized efficiently. Wasting time on non-essential activities is strictly forbidden. Constant improvement. Endeavour expects Izuku to improve steadily. Plateaus in performance are viewed as failures. Hero duties. When opportunities arise, Izuku must assist Endeavour in hero duties. This includes participating in real missions to gain practical experience. The last one was the one that surprised Izuku the most. Endeavour didn't even take his own son to hero duties. Todoroki Shadow, well known to the media due to his boasting about his perfect quirk, even if he was also training to be a hero. This made Izuku feel guilty, because he was sure he was going to create a gap between them. He didn't know their relationship, but he supposed it couldn't be too good if he was as harsh and indifferent to fans and people in general, as he was shown in the media clips where he wasn't aware that people were filming, which was dumb, because why wouldn't they film the second best pro hero in the world? Endeavour didn't seem to be very intelligent, Izuku mused. He still wasn't sure about the reason behind this training. Why would he help someone like him, some guy he didn't even know, instead of training his own son? Izuku did feel bad for Todoroki Shadow. If Endeavour had set these rules for him, he couldn't imagine what he dared to set as a standard for his children behind closed doors. With each passing day, Izuku was met with the extreme heat created by the fire in his own body. He was holding a plank as his whole body was set on flames, which had become blue due to the intensity of the exercise. Endeavour saw his plank waver, and he immediately said, "More, Midoriya. Heroes can't afford to be weak. I want to feel the heat where I am standing right now." He stood on the other side of the huge training room of his house. Endeavour had decided to stop using the exercising room of his agency, since he was starting to spend more time at his house due to the lack of need to actually be present at his workplace on a Saturday. 5 more minutes, he ordered. Izuku nodded, his vision blurred from exhaustion, and his entire body drenched in sweat. He had already trained for hours without respite, and the relentless drills showed no sign of ending. Endeavour had a reputation for his relentless pursuit of perfection, and he expected nothing less from him. A 5-minute plank, while he used his quirk, was nothing but just one more exercise of the following through. He kept doing repetitive movements as they tested still how much fire he could unleash without suffering major repercussions. As the training session continued, Izuku felt the inevitable wave of nausea building inside him. He knew that pushing himself beyond his limits was a dangerous game, but he couldn't afford to show weakness in front of his mentor. The desire to please Endeavour and prove his worth kept him going, even as his body screamed for respite. And then it happened. Just after a 10-minute repetition of an exercise that Endeavour called fire-enhanced muscle burst, which tasked him to generate intense heat with his fire quirk and use it to supercharge his muscles. Once he had done that, he executed a series of physically demanding movements. But then, he couldn't avoid doubling over and emptying the content of his stomach onto the floor. Endeavour regarded him with a critical eye. "You really need to toughen up. You are just like my son. He refuses to take this seriously enough." Izuku wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and struggled to catch his breath. The intense workout had pushed him to his limits, and the pain in his muscles was nothing compared to the frustration he felt for showing weakness. Endeavour continued, his gaze distant as he recalled a memory from the past. Shadow went through a similar phase when he was just a child. I trained him rigorously, just as I'm training you now, the man said, and his gaze hardened on Izuku. I will get someone to clean this mess. You have been proving yourself for weeks now, so I will ignore this incident. Izuku felt relief beside his shame. Get up. I am going to show you how real heroes work. Izuku couldn't help to feel despair and an overwhelming sadness. This wasn't any different than training with Hisashi. Shadow watched and heard everything, hiding behind the door. He took off before any of them could see him. So his father was training someone his age. He couldn't hear his name, but he had seen his green hair and eyes, had seen the same look he could see on his own in the mirror. The same tired, yet determined eyes. What was he doing? He was just subjecting himself to mistreatment. It was absurd. Shadow didn't know him, but he was absolutely sure the boy could train on his own. What was the need to affiliate himself to Endeavour? He had witnessed how much pain and exhaustion Izuku was willing to endure, and it only fueled Shadow's resentment. Puking, that brought back some old and unwanted memories. He knew everything had to do with the fact that Endeavour was the number 2 hero, and the fact that his name would be enough to open him unexpected doors. He had no idea his father only considered him a tool to get to Shadow. Shadow entered the training room, after making sure his father had left. And there he found him. He noted there was blood on his knees. The way he was kneeling, bandaging his burnt injuries on his knees and arms, sent him back to an era he would bury in his heart forever. Shadow, get back here, you little boy. Enji screamed at the top of his lungs, as 5-year-old Shadow escaped from him, his bare feet echoing on the wood. He was fast for his age. He needed to be. As he ran, he didn't cry for his mom as he wanted to. Silent tears dropped on his cheeks as he ran from the monster, but his sprint was quickly cut by a hard slap on the head that sent him tumbling down. Do not dare to rebel, boy. You will complete your duty, now get up. Enji grabbed him by the hair, Shadow weeping silently. Todoroki, are you okay? Shadow heard suddenly, and he had to cover his mouth to avoid gasping. Izuku had been bandaging his wounds when he suddenly heard footsteps. It was Enji's son, Shadow. He had known him as the eldest of the family from all the interviews the man had, boasting about his son having the perfect mix of his parents' quirks. This was the first time Izuku saw him in person. Nevertheless, he didn't expect to face such an open and vulnerable facial expression on the boy. His face appeared as a stoic mask, but his emotional state was given out by the way he clenched his teeth, tightened jaw with tears swelling up. So he had to ask if he was okay. And then the boy covered his mouth in apparent shock. But in 1 second, his hand wasn't there anymore. Instead, he spoke. You're an idiot, he blurted out. Excuse me. Izuku turned around and found Endeavor's son, Shadow. He felt shocked and confused. Did he imagine that the very notorious number 2 pro hero's son insulted him like that, out of nowhere? Izuku was quickly reminded of furious scarlet eyes and angry punches colliding with his body, and he couldn't help but flinch. He quickly shut down that memory. It seemed like Shadow wasn't feeling very well either, he thought, and he decided to attribute his insult to his apparent mental inner turmoil. You heard me right. There isn't any reason that could justify your willingness to be tortured by my father. He seemed to be verbally spilling. I saw at what extreme point you could reach in order to impress him. Those injuries, he went on, clearly watching Izuku's patched knees and his almost burnt arms from the extreme heat. You are reckless, and it isn't going to do you any favors. This is absurd, he declared, a frown on his face. You keep pushing so hard, only to try to surprise my father. You might be faced with a tough challenge at his trainings, but you have no idea what kind of a man he is. Your way of acting is pitiful and led by sheer ignorance. Izuku was left more confused than before. What was this speech all about? Was the son of the harshest man he met after his father really worried about his well-being? That worry, even behind the mask of anger, was more compassionate than anything his classmates had ever done for him. Where he was just regarded with fear and irk, called names like the fire freak, among others. Are you finished? Shoto stared at his green eyes, apparently surprised. Izuku was surprised at his unwavering voice, which he had expected to tremble with the assimilation that this human being was preoccupied with him. Endeavour hasn't been exactly nice, he said, stiff, and Shoto seemed to suppress a scoff. But I can only imagine what he truly is when there is nobody around. You will never be able to understand my reasons. Might you believe it or not, there is a motive powerful enough to set myself up like this. He finished. It seemed like he had a bit of consciousness over the fact that he was letting himself be mistreated to beyond any point. Shoto's eyebrows furrowed even further, so he was justifying the torment. His own suffering was being given a justification for. Fine. Be a martyr. Try to give grounds to pure abuse. I will watch you fall from your own self-destruction and irrational behavior. Don't come for me for help when it all gets torn down. Shoto did not even know his name, but it wasn't necessary. He would fail. Izuku had expected anything at the US exam entrance. The robots did not surprise him at all, and he burnt so many it seemed like he was at the top ranking in attack. However, he did get surprised when he saw Katsuki in front of him, destroying robots with his bare hands. He was left speechless. Katsuki Bakugo, quirkless since the day was born, was using an explosion quirk. Todoroki Shoto had a date with Yuki. They had finally arranged it, while Shoto had pondered if he should really be doing this. He didn't have any feelings for her, but he decided to give it a shot for her sake. He didn't want to cause her any sadness. He liked Yuki enough, he supposed. One date couldn't hurt anybody. It had been a very awkward meeting. Shoto couldn't stop fidgeting and Yuki seemed to have noticed, which was why he supposed she suddenly interlaced their hands, maybe as a gesture of reassurance. It didn't reassure him. But they did talk about the books they had recently been reading, and Shoto even told her about the science YouTube videos he had grown addicted to watch. It was a fine, normal meeting. It could have been completely different. Shoto couldn't help but think that the date could have been entirely different if he had genuine romantic interest in Yuki. But he kept that thought to himself, and that went unsaid. Shoto walked to class. He had been assigned to 1A, which seemed to held some meaning by the way his father seemed pleased. He had excelled at the exam, so he knew it wasn't Endeavour pulling strings for him. Shoto didn't want to be conceited, but he couldn't refrain from presuming his entrance was pretty much granted because of his quirk. However, as soon as he was met with his classroom, he immediately wished he would have received different classmates. The room was very loud, and there was too much going on. A blond boy had his foot on the table, while some tall guy seemed to be telling him not to do that as he wavered his arms around in exaggerated gestures. There was a loud laughter in the room from various groups of people that seemed to already know each other by the way they were engaged in heated discussions, their voices colliding in a cacophony of noise that grated on Shoto's nerves. His mismatched eyes darted around the room, trying to find a quiet, empty corner where he could retreat to. But the available seats seemed to be in the midst of all the chaos. As he walked further into the room, he could feel the collective gaze of his new classmates upon him. Shoto was no stranger to attention, but he felt a wave of discomfort wash over him as he tried to navigate the noisy environment. He longed for some peace and quiet, a stark contrast to the boisterous atmosphere of Class 1A. Shoto found an empty seat that wasn't in the middle of the chaos, and he sighed in relief. But then, something happened. A familiar face entered the room. It was the green-haired boy that his father had been training. His face was blank, but Shoto realized there was a slight tremor in his hands. It seemed like a carefully constructed image of fake calmness he had imposed himself. his green eyes darting nervously around the room and betraying him. So he hadn't failed in getting into Yua. Shadow felt a frown deepening on his face. All this would mean for him is that the extreme pain he had subjected to had been worth it, and made it stronger, he mused. It was ridiculous, and it irritated him to no point. He decided to ignore the surprise, not before noticing the boy had observed him as well. So they both knew now. He realized he would have to learn his name. Izuku had little rescue points, but he had helped a girl. She was trapped under the debris, and he had carefully targeted and burnt the debris surrounding her. The heat weakened the structural integrity of the debris, so it turned easy to manipulate, which allowed her to break free. It sounded simple, but it wasn't. Izuku had been freaking out after he did that without thinking. He could have burnt her. Sure, he was careful with his aim, but still. That had been reckless. And then there was the robot. They had targeted his knee, and it took a lot of effort, sweat, and even tears to make it fall off his balance by destroying his left knee. Almost tears because, what was he doing? Was it really a good idea to try to take on the biggest threat? He had so many questions, yet he could only act as quickly as he could before second thoughts came up. He almost had a crisis right there, he thought as he panted. The robot had been defeated by just the two of them, almost quickly due to Izuku's strong concentrated fire burst movement that he had copied from Endeavour. But in that whole time, he did have time to panic mentally. Whatever. It was over, and he had gotten in. He was in the building, yet he almost couldn't believe it. He had done it. He really had gotten into his dream school. Hisashi seemed speechless as well. When he had recovered, he got pissy drunk immediately and even offered alcohol to Izuku, who had declined, and he almost wrinkled his nose in disgust due to the smell, catching himself quickly before he turned a blank face. Hisashi didn't seem to care, and was pleased with himself. Apparently, the man was congratulating himself because he trained him since he was 5, and was already organizing a party at his house, inviting his co-workers who also indulged in the drinks. Regardless, it was inconsequential. All it mattered was that Izuku was in his dream school. But then, he heard the loud laughs and the chatter. He heard what right away reminded him of old buried memories. Fire freak, like you always think you're so damn special, don't you? Flashy flames just to cover up your own inferiority. You'll never be a real hero, Deku. Might as well quit now before you embarrass yourself even more. Look at the new, hot shot with his flashy quirk. You think you're so cool, don't you? I bet his ego is just as powerful as his quirk. He just says it when we ask him to show off. You're not special. You're just a freak with a stupid quirk. You are nothing without your quirk. You are just a big joke. His footsteps grew heavier, and the distant sound of an explosion from a nearby classroom sent a shiver down his spine. Images of his childhood flooded his mind, vivid recollections of Katsuki's relentless bullying. The taunts, the jeers, and the humiliation, all stemming from the uniqueness of his fire quirk. Almost everyone had participated in the bullying. It was weird when someone didn't, but then again, maybe they felt pity for him. The large walls seemed to enclose him in a tight hug, his heart out of his chest and tears fighting to appear. But he decided this couldn't be happening. He couldn't have a panic attack on his first day of school. He had to get his shit together, or he would stand out too much. He quickly went to an empty corridor and took his phone to look in the mirror. He didn't have red eyes. Good. He quickly started thinking about the periodic table, hoping that would distract his mind. If he let himself dwell in his past, he would have a nightmare of a time in his ideal school. He wanted to make himself proud and just feel happy for once. So he went back to the classroom, reached the door with trembling hands and went in. It's you. The guy who beat the robot with me. The girl from the exam earlier had popped out of nowhere, grabbing Izuku's arm excitedly. I am Uraraka Ochako. It's a pleasure, she almost yelled, and he started to panic. She was way too close, and he had no idea what to reply until some sense slapped him. He could just present himself back. He said his name, still thinking he had truly had no idea what to say. It was the second time someone treated him like he was normal, like he could actually be nice to talk to. You really shined out there. Disappeared so fast I barely got your name. To be honest, I am still in awe that we could defeat that thing. Must be nice to have such a powerful quirk. Mine makes me puke, but I'm sure you remember, she said, apparently embarrassed for the way a flush crept on her cheeks, and she touched her neck in a nervous manner. He did remember the way she had emptied her stomach after the robot had been taken down, and he had assumed it was a side effect of her quirk. Turns out he was right. However, he quickly realized she had complimented him. He was becoming increasingly shocked. Not only did she say something nice about his quirk, but she was nice overall. It was nothing like the coldness he met at his high school. I couldn't have defeated that thing without you. He let his thoughts out loud. You threw so much debris and robots at that thing. Your quirk is truly powerful under your hands. Not only can you turn objects completely weightless and turn them into lethal projectiles, but you also can use it for so many other purposes. It can allow you to rescue people by lifting carefully fallen structures if they are trapped like you were. But you could also locate survivors in emergency situations by also lifting the debris. Izuku stopped himself, realizing Ochako had become a tomato. Had he gone too far? He crossed a line, probably. I am sorry. I didn't want to feel uneasy or overwhelm you. I just really think your quirk is nice and… He started to apologize, bowing to truly show his regret. He didn't want to scare off the first truly genuine person he had met. No, it's okay. I was just so surprised. Only my parents have been so enthusiastic over my quirk, she explained, flustered. How could this boy not realize how nice he was? He had nothing to apologize for, she decided. I take this as a huge compliment, she insisted, grabbing his hands, which were covering his face in a shy gesture. But then, she felt mortified. She couldn't just grab his hands like that, even if she had done it, so he would stop covering his face in shame. Izuku regarded how, out of nowhere, she bowed. I am so sorry. I just wanted you to stop being embarrassed, so that's why I grabbed your hands, she justified, still bowing. No, it's fine, Izuku replied, more shocked than ever. She was so considerate. I just didn't want to make you uncomfortable, she insisted. And so they kept on, one apologizing while the other party, Izuku, claimed that he had already crossed a line in the first place, while Ochako denied it. It was going to be a long day. But he had already had a really positive encounter, he realized, and them being friends could actually be a possibility. Shadow carefully observed this interaction. From all the noise, he couldn't really hear their words, but he saw them both bowing at each other. Humans could be so weird, he mused. The boy, whose name was Izuku Midoriya, he learned after listening to the teacher checking the list, was nothing but really friendly, from what he had seen in that encounter. He seemed really nervous by his mannerisms. He kept bouncing his leg while he was sitting, pulling on his nails, and by the way he had covered his face multiple times during his chat with the girl. Shadow couldn't remember her name, since he had only paid attention to find out Izuku's. He would learn it at some point. Shadow wasn't expecting to meet him again. He had truly meant his words when he told him he would fail. And he had also not expected this anxious and candid demeanor from him. He had expected the same distant behavior he tended to show in his high school days, because even if he didn't like him, he could recognize they both had the same similarity. They both wanted to achieve their goal, and would go above and beyond to do so. This determination could blind people into believing they didn't need any friends, while science clearly said otherwise. But, oh well, it seemed like it was just him who struggled to accept friendships were necessary for a better mental health. Whatever. Izuku Midoriya had plenty of issues to worry. One of them his father, and secondly, His toxic determination that blinded him into thinking it was justified to push himself into abusive training. He clearly wasn't self-aware enough. Not as much as Shadow. However, Shadow didn't expect his shyness either. He had a powerful quirk. He had seen at his school what this could mean for people. Some let it get to their heads, developing a strange superiority complex, while they treated others with less flashy quirks like trash. He had seen it in first-hand many times. The way the hushed whispers were always said on the back of the only quirkless kid his class had. He remembered wanting to do something, but not being able to. After all, talking to these kids to get some sense into them would be useless. And none of the cruel taunts were said openly in front of the quirkless girl, because that would mean that they could actually be accused of bullying. And that did have consequences. But now, Shadow realized he could just have offered a helping hand to that girl. He could have become her friend, and therefore he would have done something good for once. If Shadow was a better person, he would have done it. Izuku put on his costume, his heart racing. He still couldn't believe that he had not only made a friend, but also managed to get into UA. He felt giddy. After Minta had been expelled, the class seemed nervous to go on. But Izuku guessed his teacher wouldn't expel any more people. After all, they were just 19 students now. He had heard the girls in his class say that it was a good riddance because Minta was a huge creep. He also felt relieved to know such a person wouldn't be with them anymore. His suit featured reinforced boots designed to withstand high temperatures. The soles of the boots were equipped with shock absorbers to help him handle the force of his powerful movements. Additionally, the suit had a lightweight, flame-resistant cape that could double as a shield when wrapped around him. The mask he wore was modified with a built-in, heat-resistant visor to protect his eyes from the intense flames he could create. The suit's design incorporated sleek lines and a stylized flame pattern, giving Izuku a distinctive and kind of imposing appearance. At least, that's what his dad told him when he announced he had gone through his things and found his design drawn in one of his notebooks. As if his words mattered. Shadow listened carefully to All Might's words. Surprisingly enough, he was deemed their teacher. Somehow, Endeavour had heard about it, and he was disgusted, which had made him smile brightly when he found out. He was indifferent to whatever All Might would do with his time, but it was always nice to see the old man pissed off. All Might quickly explained that he would pair them into teams of 2 people and make them fight each other in a battle that would have one team as a hero and the other as a villain. Shadow couldn't be less thrilled. He hated teamwork already at his school, and now he had to pair up with somebody he didn't know and somehow managed to coordinate. Then, he had a sudden realization. That shouldn't be hard as long as he communicated with his teammate. Just a bunch of quick words, and he would be done. He felt the desire to laugh at himself. Why was he panicking already? All Might created the teams. Shadow was paired with Uraraka Ochako, the girl Izuku had been talking to. He felt indifference creeping up on him. She was standing in a tight suit that looked uncomfortable by Shadow's own sense of fashion. She had heard it too, and she looked behind her, searching for him. And when he did find him, she curled her lips upwards and made a small wave. Seriously, a wave. But then he thought it would be rude not to wave back, so he did, feeling ridiculous. They weren't close enough to talk, and that was perfectly fine with him. They definitely didn't have to play buddy-buddy by being overly friendly. They regrouped, and All Might decided Team A would fight Team D, which meant, he realized, he would have to fight. No, they, he thought, would have to fight Izuku and Bakugo. I'm so nervous. Izuku has a fire capable of melting off metal, and Bakugo, she trailed off, as if mentioning him would be self-explanatory. It was. He had the second most powerful throw in the fitness test, thanks to his explosive quirk. He was quite the threat. Yeah, I get it. But he must have a weakness. Even if Shadow recognized Bakugo and Izuku could be a worrying menace if they acted as a team, it was nothing they couldn't handle and prepare a strategy for. Midoriya told me the explosions he creates are made from his sweat. We can just freeze the whole building. Make him so cold he can't produce enough nitroglycerine, Uraraka mused. Shadow nodded, feeling impressed. He hadn't taken her for a strategist due to her nervous manner. He had underestimated her. He nodded. That will do. We have yet to decide what to do with Midoriya. They had to make an additional plan. Izuku and Katsuki stood next to each other next to the fake bomb. The silence was deafening until Izuku built up the courage to talk. Back there, you created explosions from your sweat. Katsuki didn't reply nor look at him, but he tried to hide his surprise. How did he know about that? How is that possible? Deku continued. It's none of your fucking business. I don't get why you are trying to figure me out like I am some fucking Scrabble. But I really don't care. You don't get to ask. He spat, furious. They weren't friends at all, and Midoriya thought he had the privilege to make him offer explanations. Maybe he wasn't a quirkless failure anymore, but he wasn't going to explain it to anybody. He would just deny it if asked. He had decided a long time ago. He thought of the possibility that Deku could finally stop looking down on him as if he were a mere stone on his path. He felt his anger grow, this time directed at himself. Why did he think about that? Like he wished for it to happen. Like he cared. It was an intrusive thought. He didn't care. I'm sorry. Deku quickly apologized, like he had said something terrible. He had. Good. At least he wasn't that conceited to realize it was a ridiculous question. Stand out of my way, Deku, Katsuki yelled, before taking off. He ran to the hallway with no plan in mind. It was fine. He wasn't going to need any to beat up that girl with the useless gravity quirk. Nor did he need to think about how he could defeat the boy with a double quirk. Whatever. His quirk was overpowered. He could take them both. Kaken, we need a plan, Katsuki wanted to yell in fury. And he did, letting out his bottled-up anger. Kaken, Deku said, this time unsure after he screamed out of nowhere. Shut the fuck up. Why are you following me? The blonde yelled. He couldn't explain Deku's behavior. It was obvious Deku should stay guarding the base while he attacked them. You need to stop this. We can't rush like this. We are supposed to work as a team. And Izuku was quickly interrupted. I can handle them on my own, Deku. Go guard the bomb or whatever. I don't care, but don't you dare think I am weak anymore. I don't need your help to make me triumph. All you need is to stand back and get out of my way, he shouted. That's it. That would make Deku finally leave him alone. But it did not. Deku grabbed his arm as he screamed at the top of his lungs. Stop thinking this is a game. We are against our strongest competitors, and we can't miss this chance to prove ourselves. We mustn't underestimate them. That's all he could say before an explosion manifested right next to his head. Listen to me, Deku. You think we are underestimating them? You are going to stop underestimating me. I can take them on, so stop your rambling. He grabbed his collar to make his point clear. For all we could know, they should be already on their way here to the target. So shut up for once and make yourself useful. Izuku realized, as he was being grabbed by Katsuki, and some spit came on his face from his yelling, that what he was doing was useless. There was no point in trying to change Bakugo's mind. Todoroki followed the explosion noise. His heart raced. Did Uraraka get caught? He ran to the noise, anxiety creeping up on him. But what he found had nothing to do with what he had expected. Bakugo was clutching Izuku by his hero suit. He looked more angry than his father on his worst days. They still hadn't noticed his presence, so he took the chance to listen. I never looked down on you, Kaken. It was you who made differences between us because of our quirks, or well, the lack of. Izuku was interrupted by Bakugo, who slapped him on the cheek so hard Izuku fell backwards. Izuku quickly stood up in shock, but Shadow saw in his posture that he seemed ready to defend himself. You are doing it again. You are looking down on me. He charged at him, throwing him on the ground. As he was on top of him, Bakugo punched Izuku so hard he saw stars. Shadow didn't know what was happening. All Might observed the fight going on, as he heard gasps in the room from his students. "Teacher, you must stop this. Bakugo is beating up his own teammate," Mina asked, her eyes shining with determination. Other voices manifested their agreement. Izuku was being used as a punch bag, but suddenly, something happened. Fire crept out under Bakugo's body, where Izuku was laying on the ground. He was using his quirk to fight Bakugo. "Teacher, this is unacceptable." This time, Ida yelled, apparently upset with the situation. All Might quickly recovered from his shock and grabbed the microphone. "Young Bakugo and young Midoriya, if you keep on fighting, you are going to fail the exam. I will not tolerate this level of violence, especially between your own team. This is inadmissible. You ought to cooperate with each other and act as a union," he said into the microphone, and his voice echoed in the building, his frown deepening. "Even if you are playing as the villains, this is not hero-like behavior at all." Katsuki quickly stepped back as he felt the heat on Deku's body. So he had decided to fight back. Nevertheless, Izuku was still laying on the ground, his nose bleeding and his lips chapped from the punches. So it was a bluff, a threat to scare him off. He refused to fight him, as he didn't see him as an equal, Bakugo thought, furious once again. "You must stop if you don't want us to be disqualified. Snap out of it, Keiken," he yelled from the floor, trying to stand up. He felt dizzy as he stood up. "You are too much of a weakling," he remembered his father say. Shadow heard All Might's speech. He couldn't shake off the shock, but he snapped out of it once he heard the interruption. He had to come up with his plan quickly, so he rapidly created ice under his feet, sliding on the ice until he caught up to them. Before they could react, Shadow created a thick wall of ice behind them, so they would have no remedy but to fight him. No running back. It didn't seem like they wanted to do that anyways. Apparently, they had forgotten about Uraraka's existence. "Stop this madness and fight me," he said. And he proceeded to flee. "What an hypocrite," Bakugo mused before he ran to follow him. Deku behind him as he struggled to catch up to Bakugo, who was using explosions to propel himself. The way he had come out of nowhere just to defy them, it was incredibly suspicious. Bakugo could already tell it was a trap, but he wasn't going to act like he was scared of Todoroki. He could take him easily. "Uraraka, now!" Todoroki yelled, and suddenly, debris fell from the ceiling. It was a massive amount of debris, and before it could fall on them, Izuku had the distant thought, how did they even get that amount of ruins? But then, he saw the burnt walls, and it all made sense. While they were arguing and wasting time, Uraraka and Todoroki already had a carefully constructed plan to beat them. How could they be so careless? Not only had they walked straight into a trap, but they also let Uraraka have a free route to the target. They were failing. And it was all because they couldn't stop fighting. Izuku realized, as he thought all of this watching the frozen debris fall, that they needed to improvise. He couldn't waste more time by blaming themselves while this was happening. He quickly lit up his palms on fire and shot it upwards, hoping the fire would be strong enough to melt the frozen debris into ashes. He closed his eyes, waiting for the impact that never came. Opening his eyes, he realized his strategy had worked, while Katsuki had also defended himself by blasting an explosion into the air. The rest of the debris was on the ground. They weren't hurt, but that was the less important thing. By this point, Uraraka would have already reached the target, he realized, panicking. "Kaken, quickly, blow up the whole building," he told him, hoping that Bakugo wouldn't be too proud to ignore him. To his major surprise, Bakugo seemed to understand. "Don't you dare order me around, conceited asshole," he replied. But he did what he was told. The deafening roar of Bakugo's explosion filled the air as an immense blast of fiery energy erupted from his palms, tearing through the building's structure. The force of the explosion sent shockwaves through the entire floor, causing the walls to shudder and crumble. Flames and debris were hurled upward, creating a fiery vortex that threatened to consume everything in its path. Deku, Todoroki, and Uraraka were caught in the maelstrom of destruction. The intense heat and pressure pushed them back, making it nearly impossible to maintain their footing. Flames licked at their suits, scorching the fabric and sending searing waves of pain through their bodies. Deku clenched his teeth, his vision obscured by the searing brightness of the explosion. He knew that Bakugo's plan was to prevent Uraraka from reaching the fake bomb, but this was an all-out assault. Todoroki, too, struggled to stay on his feet, using his ice quirk to shield himself from the worst of the flames. Uraraka, determined to fulfill her mission, reached out to activate her quirk, but the intense heat made it challenging to focus. The air itself seemed to waver from the sheer energy of the explosion. She gritted her teeth, fighting against the oppressive force, and slowly managed to make herself weightless, floating slightly above the ground. The building continued to crumble around them as the explosion's shockwaves spread, making their surroundings increasingly unstable. The floor beneath them cracked and groaned, threatening to give way. Deku knew they needed to act fast to survive this fiery onslaught and complete their mission.